Human activities such as industrialization, land use change, deforestation, agriculture, and burning fossil fuels have caused global warming, and today's climate change impacts are being experienced more frequently. Despite Eswatini not being a major contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, it remains vulnerable to climate change impacts.
Well, it's true that the climate in Eswatini is changing, and the changes which are happening to the parameters are in line with what is happening in a global scale. For instance, in the past 41 years, the trends are showing that the mean temperature is increasing at a rate of 0.16 degrees per decade. For rainfall, there is no much changes in terms of the annual accumulation, but the distribution temporarily of the rainfall is changing. You can see there is a late onset of rainfall, erratic rainfall patterns which are having an impact on our farmers. We also see that we now have high magnitude rainfall, like we've recently had a collection of more than 400 millimeters received in one day at Mhluni.
Recently, we have been seeing a lot of infrastructural damage caused by flash floods, which have led to huge economic losses for local businesses, specifically in the city of Mbabane. Even across the country, extensive damage has been caused by the frequent occurrence of storms, which has resulted in collapsed bridges and damage to built-up structures.
The effects of climate change are very severe. We in the water sector are experiencing that very, very much. As we all know, Eswatini is an agro-based economy, and we rely a lot on water resources for agriculture. And in the recent El Nino episode, we had serious shortages of water, leading to the drying of dams and also loss of water for irrigation purposes. And we even experienced damage in terms of livestock and things like that.
These impacts felt by communities and ecosystems are reversing the development gains achieved till today, and the country faces the task of building up its resilience to climate change. In 2015, at the Paris Climate Conference, 195 countries, including Eswatini, adopted the Paris Agreement, a legally binding treaty on climate change to limit global warming to well below 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. The agreement was a commitment to tackling climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions and taking measures to adapt to the unavoidable impacts of climate change. This requires economic and social transformations to face the climate challenges now and going into the future. Eswatini, as a signatory of the Paris Agreement, communicated her climate action, known as the Nationally Determined Contributions. The ambitious NDC of Eswatini adopts an economy-wide greenhouse gas emissions reduction target of 5% by 2030, which can increase to 14% with external financing, and this translates to over 1 million tons fewer greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 compared to a baseline scenario.
Eswatini's NDC was spearheaded by the Ministry of Tourism and Environmental Affairs and the Ministry of Economic Planning and Development, and oversight was given by a multi-stakeholder technical advisory group. We adopted a consultative process, taking a whole of government and whole of society approach to develop the enhanced NDC, which includes adaptation, mitigation, and cross-cutting sectors such as gender, youth, and disaster risk reduction. The key prioritized sectors in adaptation include agriculture, water, health, ecosystems, biodiversity, and infrastructure. Under mitigation, we prioritized energy and transport, industrial processes, product use, waste, and forestry.
While revising the NDC, we collected data and undertook analytical studies and modeled for greenhouse gas emissions for the future. We also did policy analysis and assessed barriers and enabling frameworks for implementing climate action in Eswatini. All this helped us develop an NDC that is informed by science. The process was a stakeholder-driven one with extensive engagements done with several groups, including policymakers, traditional leaders, youth, gender groups, NGOs, academia, government officials, and many more. So all their valuable inputs helped shape our NDC.
In revising our NDC, it was very important for us to align it with other ongoing national processes, for example, our National Adaptation Plan and our national communication. So the process found us doing those processes. So we made sure that the workshops, the stakeholders that we are calling, we are able to align and complement instead of having separate workshops, and look at how some of the processes under the NC4 and the National Adaptation Plan can complement the work of the NDC. And there was quite a lot of complementarity and synergies that were built. For instance, in the mitigation analysis process, we actually worked through with the process that was actually ongoing under the 4th National Communication. And the same with the stakeholders and coordination, we aligned that with all the processes that were currently ongoing at that time.
Well, being a member of the Technical Advisory Group was important in this process, because the process of formulating an NDC, it's a consensus making process where there's a lot of backstopping on the scientific work that is done by the different experts. So for us, particularly me coming from the Environment Authority, this was important because the clearing house mechanism for such work is important, because when we formulate such a key policy process or document, there's a need for this actually clearing of this scientific information, so that when we come to the policy formulation stage, all of this information has actually been cleared by all the stakeholders that have been part of this process so far.
Climate change presents the single biggest threat to sustainable development and our achievement of the SDGs. Therefore, Eswatini's National Development Plan has integrated climate change, and we are aligning the NDC and NDP for joint resource mobilization to ensure that our development is climate-proofed.
Eswatini relies on the tourism sector for her economic growth. As such, environmental protection is important. Ecotourism requires us to have a healthy ecosystem and to protect our biodiversity, wildlife, forests, flora, and fauna. Climate change affects the environment and thereby livelihoods, in particular those that depend on the environment, including tourism, forestry, and agriculture, among others.
Eswatini takes climate change action very, very seriously. As a result, we have prioritized the integration of climate change into our national development processes. We know that the implementation of the NDC requires a lot of collaboration and partnerships, particularly for resources. We are therefore calling all sectors, development partners, NGOs, the private sector, and everyone to partner and translate NDC into practical actions on the ground.
The Kingdom of Eswatini's enhanced NDC and NDC implementation plan was launched in May 2023, an event that marked the beginning of Eswatini's fight against climate change.
The NDC Partnership join everybody today to congratulate the Kingdom of Eswatini through Ministry of Tourism and Environment Affairs for this milestone of launching the ambitious plan for NDC implementation. And as you've heard, the 3 ministries